The crystal chandelier above table 7 cast dancing shadows across the white tablecloth as I balanced 3 plates of ossobuco on my forearm. My feet screamed in protest against the mandatory black heels, and the tight pencil skirt restricted my movements as I navigated through the crowded dining room of Celestino Ristorante. 6 hours into my shift, and the night was far from over. "Isabella, table 12 needs water," Marco, our floor manager, hissed as he passed by, his eyes narrowing with that familiar mixture of impatience and barely concealed disdain. "And you're falling behind on the VIP section." I bit back a sharp retort and nodded instead, my jaw clenching. 3 months working at Celestino, and Marco still treated me like I was incapable of handling the pressure. The fact that I'd never once dropped a plate or mixed up an order didn't seem to matter to him. "On it," I managed through a tight smile, depositing the plates at table 7 with practiced efficiency. The elderly couple barely glanced at me as they continued their conversation, and I moved swiftly toward the service station, my mind already calculating the tips I'd need to make tonight's target. Rent was due in 3 days, and my mother's medication costs had increased again. The experimental treatment the doctors recommended wasn't covered by insurance, and every dollar mattered. The VIP section loomed ahead, separated from the main dining room by elegant frosted glass panels and velvet ropes. It was where Celestino's most important guests dined, the ones who could afford the $500 tasting menu without blinking, the ones who treated servers like we were invisible until they needed something. I'd been avoiding that section all night, not because I couldn't handle it, but because something about the energy there felt different tonight. More tense, more dangerous. Bella, Elena, my only real friend at the restaurant, caught my arm as I reached for a water pitcher. Her dark eyes were wide with something between excitement and fear. "Did you see who's in the VIP section?" "No, who?" I asked, filling my pitcher with ice water, the cubes clinking against the glass. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that barely carried over the ambient noise of clinking silverware and murmured conversations. "Matteo Russo." The name meant nothing to me at first. I looked at her blankly, and she rolled her eyes. "You really don't pay attention to anything outside your little bubble, do you?" She shook her head. "He's basically royalty in this city. Owns half the real estate downtown, restaurants, clubs, legitimate businesses." She paused, her expression darkening. "And some not-so-legitimate ones, if you know what I mean." A chill ran down my spine. "Mafia? Shh." Elena glanced around frantically. "Don't say that word out loud, just be careful in there, okay?" Marco's already on edge. "Apparently Mr. Russo doesn't come here often, and when he does, everything has to be perfect." I nodded, my stomach twisting with anxiety. Perfect. Of course, because my night wasn't stressful enough already. The VIP section was dimmer than the main dining room, lit by smaller chandeliers that cast a golden glow over 4 round tables. Only one was occupied tonight. 6 men in expensive suits sat around it, their conversation low and serious. Bodyguards, unmistakable in their dark clothing and watchful eyes, stood at strategic points around the room, and at the head of the table sat a man who made the air feel thinner just by existing. He was younger than I expected, perhaps mid-30s, with jet-black hair styled back from a face that belonged on a Roman statue. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened by 5 o'clock shadow, and lips pressed into a firm line as he listened to the man beside him speak. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. Even from a distance, I could see they were an unusual shade of blue, so dark they almost appeared black in the dim lighting. Eyes that didn't just look at things, they dissected them. I approached the table with my water pitcher, forcing myself to breathe normally, to maintain the professional smile I'd perfected over months of dealing with difficult customers. "Good evening. Gentlemen," I said, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. "May I refill your water?" The conversation didn't stop. None of them looked at me. I was furniture to them, background noise. I moved around the table, refilling glasses, hyper-aware of the weight of those dark blue eyes now tracking my movements. When I reached his glass, my hand trembled slightly. I hated that it did, hated that this stranger's presence could affect me so viscerally. As I poured, I felt rather than saw him turn his head slightly, his attention shifting from his conversation to me. "What's your name?" His voice was low, accented with something I couldn't quite place. Italian, perhaps, but softened by years of living elsewhere. The table fell silent. Every eye turned to me, and I felt my cheeks flush with heat. "Isabella, sir," I managed, setting down the pitcher to avoid spilling it. "Is there anything else I can get for you?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied my face with an intensity that made me want to look away, but I forced myself to hold his gaze. Something flickered in those dark blue eyes. Interest? Amusement? I couldn't tell. "The wine list?" one of the other men said, breaking the tension. "We'd like to see the reserve selection." I nodded quickly, grateful for the interruption. "Of course. I'll bring it right away." As I turned to leave, I heard him speak again. So quietly I almost missed it. Isabella. The way he said my name, rolling the syllables with that accent, sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. I fled the VIP section, my professional composure cracking the moment I was out of sight. Elena was waiting by the service station, her eyebrows raised in question. "Well?" "He asked my name," I said, retrieving the leather-bound reserve wine list from its locked cabinet. My hands were shaking, and I curled them into fists to stop the tremor. "Matteo Russo asked your name?" Elena's eyes widened. "Bella. That's either very good or very bad, and I'm honestly not sure which." Neither was I. But I didn't have time to think about it. Marco was already gesturing frantically at me from across the room, his face red with stress. I returned to the VIP section, the heavy wine list tucked under my arm. This time, when I approached the table, Matteo Russo looked up immediately, as if he'd been waiting for me. "Your reserve selection, gentlemen," I said, placing the list on the table beside him. He opened it without looking at the pages, his eyes still on my face. "What do you recommend, Isabella?" The question caught me off guard. Servers weren't supposed to recommend from the reserve list. We were supposed to describe and let the guest choose, but something in his tone made it clear he expected an answer. I leaned forward slightly, scanning the list. My knowledge of wine was limited to what I'd learned during training, but I knew enough to sound competent. The 2015 Barolo is exceptional. Full-bodied, complex, with notes of cherry and leather. It pairs beautifully with red meat. "The Barolo, then," he said, closing the list and handing it back to me. His fingers brushed mine briefly, and I felt that touch like an electric shock. 2 bottles. 2 bottles of wine that cost $1,500 each. I tried not to let my shock show as I nodded and turned to retrieve them from the wine cellar. The rest of the service went smoothly. I brought the wine, opened both bottles with practiced precision, poured the first glasses, and retreated to let them dine in peace. I could feel his eyes on me whenever I entered the VIP section, that intense gaze tracking my movements around the other tables. It should have made me uncomfortable. Should have felt like a violation. Instead, I felt hyper-aware of everything, my body thrumming with an energy I didn't understand. The night wore on. The VIP section ordered appetizers, then main courses. I served them all without incident, maintaining my professional mask even as my exhaustion deepened. By the time they requested dessert, it was past 11, and my feet felt like they were on fire. Marco intercepted me as I headed to the kitchen. "They've requested another bottle of the Barolo. Don't screw this up, Isabella. Do you understand? These people are very important." "I understand," I said, biting back the urge to tell him that I hadn't screwed anything up all night. I retrieved the 3rd bottle from the cellar, checking the vintage twice to be sure. My hands were steadier now, fatigue overriding nervousness. I'd served dozens of tables tonight. This was just another one, regardless of who sat at it. That's what I told myself as I entered the VIP section for what I hoped would be the final time. The conversation at the table was more animated now, the wine loosening tongues. I approached from Matteo Russo's left side, the bottle cradled in my arm in the proper presentation position. "Gentlemen, your Barolo," I announced, showing him the label first as protocol demanded. He glanced at it and nodded. I moved to pour, starting with his glass as was customary for the person who ordered. That's when disaster struck. One of the bodyguards shifted position suddenly, moving to whisper something to the man at the far end of the table. I hadn't seen him approaching. I stepped back instinctively to give him room, and my heel caught on something. The thick carpet, a fold in the rug. It didn't matter what. I felt myself falling in slow motion. The bottle tilted in my hands, and I watched in horror as deep crimson wine arced through the air like blood. It splashed directly across Matteo Russo's chest, soaking into his crisp white shirt and the lapels of what was obviously a custom-tailored suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. The room froze. Every conversation stopped. The only sound was the gentle drip of wine falling from the table edge onto the marble floor. I caught myself against the table, the now empty bottle clutched in my shaking hands. My entire body felt cold despite the heat rushing to my face. "I'm so sorry," I breathed, the words barely audible. "I'm so sorry." Matteo Russo sat perfectly still, looking down at his ruined shirt and suit. Wine dripped from the fabric, staining it a deep purple red. One of his men stood abruptly, his hand moving inside his jacket, but Matteo raised a single finger, and the man froze. The silence stretched for an eternity. My mind raced with the consequences. I'd be fired, obviously. Marco would make sure of it. But what else? Would they sue me? Could they? Would this man, this dangerous man, do something worse? Then Matteo Russo looked up at me, and something impossible happened. He smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not really. It was more like the expression of someone who'd just witnessed something unexpectedly fascinating. His dark blue eyes held mine, and I saw curiosity there, amusement even, but not anger. "Everyone out," he said quietly, his voice carrying absolute authority despite its low volume. The room erupted into motion. The other men at the table stood and filed out quickly, followed by the bodyguards. Within seconds, the VIP section was empty except for the two of us. I stood frozen, still clutching the empty wine bottle, wine dripping from my fingers onto the floor. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Matteo Russo rose from his chair with fluid grace, wine-soaked suit and all. He was taller than I'd realized, at least 6'2", and standing this close I could see the details I'd missed from a distance. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his jaw tightened slightly when he was thinking, the scent of his cologne. Something expensive and woody that the wine hadn't completely overwhelmed. "Isabella," he said, my name a low rumble in his chest. "Look at me." I'd been staring at his ruined shirt, unable to meet his eyes. Now I forced my gaze upward, expecting to see fury, disgust, something that would explain the ice-cold fear running through my veins. Instead, I saw something that made my breath catch. Interest. Raw, undisguised interest. I started, then stopped, not knowing what to say. "I'll pay for the suit. I know it's expensive, but I can make payments. I'll work something out." "Please, how much do you make here?" he interrupted, his head tilting slightly as he studied my face. The question threw me. "What? How much does Celestino pay you per hour?" I swallowed hard. $12 plus tips. "And how much do you need?" My mind blanked. I don't understand." He stepped closer, and I instinctively stepped back, my spine hitting the wall behind me. I hadn't realized I'd retreated that far. He didn't touch me, but his proximity made the air feel charged, electric. "How much do you need, Isabella? For your mother's medical bills, for your rent that's due in 3 days, for all those things that keep you working double shifts and picking up extra hours despite the fact that you're clearly exhausted." Ice flooded my veins. "How do you know about my mother?" A slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I make it my business to know things." The implications of that statement terrified me. "Have you been watching me?" "Only for the last hour," he said, as if that should be reassuring. "But you're interesting, Isabella Romano. You work hard. You're professional despite how badly Marco treats you. You have integrity. You tried to recommend a wine you thought we'd actually enjoy, rather than the most expensive option." His eyes held mine. "And when you spilled wine on the most dangerous man in this city, your first instinct was to apologize and offer to make it right, even though you have no way to actually do so. That speaks to character." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I should go. Marco will want to fire me, and I should just—" "Marco will do nothing," Matteo said, his voice dropping to something darker, more dangerous. "Because I own Celestino. I own this building. I own half this city, Isabella. Marco works for me. Which means, as of this moment, so do you." The words hung between us, and I wasn't sure if they were a promise or a threat. "I don't understand," I whispered. He reached up slowly, giving me time to pull away, and gently took the empty wine bottle from my still clenched fingers, setting it on the table beside us. "You intrigue me," he said simply. "That doesn't happen often. The last time a woman caught my attention like this was—" He paused, something painful flickering across his features. "It was a very long time ago, Mr. Russo." "Matteo," he corrected. "I think we're past formalities, given that you've baptized me in $3,000 wine." Despite everything, despite my fear and confusion and the surreal nature of this conversation, I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. I suppressed it, biting my lip. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Those dark blue eyes saw everything. "There it is," he murmured. "I wondered what your real smile looked like. You hide it behind that professional mask you wear, but it's there. Something genuine in a world full of pretenders." "I need to clean this up," I said, gesturing weakly at the wine staining the carpet, the table, him, "and apologize to your guests. And probably start job hunting because there's no way—" "No," he interrupted firmly. "You're not cleaning anything. You're not apologizing to anyone. And you're certainly not job hunting." He stepped back slightly, giving me space to breathe. "Go home, Isabella. Get some sleep. Tomorrow morning, my driver will pick you up at 9. "Pick me up? Why?" "Because we have things to discuss. About your mother's treatment. About your financial situation. About a proposition I'd like to make." Every warning bell in my head started ringing. What kind of proposition? His smile turned enigmatic. "The kind that could change your life, if you're brave enough to consider it." "I'm not—" I started to protest, but he was already walking away, toward the private exit at the back of the VIP section. He paused at the door, turning back to look at me one last time. 9 o'clock, Isabella. Don't make me send my men to collect you. It's much more pleasant when people come willingly." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the wine-stained VIP section, my mind reeling with what had just happened. I stood there for several long minutes, trying to process it all. Matteo Russo, Mafia boss, owner of Celestino, interested in me for reasons I couldn't begin to understand. Elena found me there, her face pale with concern. "Bella, oh my God, I heard what happened. Marco is furious. He's been ranting about—" She stopped, taking in my expression. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I think I'm in trouble," I said softly, my voice hollow. "Did he threaten you? Because if he did, we can go to the police, we can—" "No," I interrupted. "He didn't threaten me. I trailed off, not knowing how to explain. "He said his driver is picking me up tomorrow morning." Elena's eyes widened. "Bella, you can't get into a car with Matteo Russo's driver. You have no idea what he wants from you." But that was the thing. I had some idea. And that's what terrified me most. Because when Matteo Russo looked at me with those dark blue eyes, when he stepped close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, when he said I intrigued him, something inside me had responded. Something I'd thought dead after years of grinding poverty and exhaustion and fighting just to survive. Something that wanted to say yes. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. Marco never came to fire me, which was perhaps the strangest part of the whole evening. Instead, he avoided me entirely, which was so unlike his usual micromanaging that it only confirmed what Matteo had said. He owned Celestino. He owned Marco. When I finally clocked out at 2 a.m, I found an envelope waiting in my locker. Inside was $2,000 in cash and a note in elegant handwriting for your mother's medication. Consider it an advance on tomorrow's conversation. MRI stared at the money, my hands shaking. This was more than I made in a month. This could buy my mother's medication for the next 2 months, with enough left over to pay rent and eat something other than ramen. But accepting it would mean something. Would obligate me to him in ways I couldn't fully understand yet. I should have left the money in my locker. Should have walked away and never looked back. Instead, I tucked the envelope into my purse and walked out into the cold night air, knowing that tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I would get into that car. Because sometimes, when you're drowning, you don't question the hand that reaches down to pull you up, even if you suspect that hand might drag you somewhere darker than the water you're already in. The city lights blurred as I walked to the bus stop, exhaustion finally catching up with me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. "Sleep well, Isabella. Tomorrow everything changes. I should have felt afraid." And I did, but I also felt something else. Something that kept me awake long after I reached my tiny studio apartment. Long after I'd counted the money for the third time. Long after I'd checked on my mother at the care facility and confirmed she was stable. Anticipation. Matteo Russo had looked at me like I was someone worth seeing. Like I mattered. Like I was more than just a struggling server drowning in debt and desperation. And God help me. Some broken part of me wanted to find out why. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Matteo Russo's face. The way those dark blue eyes had studied me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve. The ghost of that smile when I drenched him in wine. The quiet authority in his voice when he'd said, "Tomorrow, everything changes." By the time dawn crept through the thin curtains of my studio apartment, I'd convinced myself at least a dozen times not to go, to text that unknown number and politely decline, to take the $2,000, return it somehow, and pretend last night never happened. But then I'd think of my mother in that care facility, her body ravaged by cancer, kept alive by medications I could barely afford. I'd think of the experimental treatment her oncologist had mentioned, the one that could give her real hope instead of just buying time. The treatment that cost $30,000. $30,000 I would never have working at Celestino. At 7, I gave up on sleep entirely and dragged myself to the shower. The hot water did little to ease the tension knotted in my shoulders. I stood under the spray, trying to organize my thoughts into something coherent. What did Matteo Russo want from me? Elena's warnings echoed in my mind. Men like him didn't do anything without reason. They didn't hand out money or show interest in broke servers unless they wanted something in return. And the things men like that wanted. I shut off the water abruptly, refusing to let my imagination spiral further. I'd find out soon enough. Choosing what to wear became an unexpected challenge. Everything in my closet was either work uniforms or clothes too worn and faded for meeting a man who probably spent more on a single shirt than I did on 6 months of rent. Finally, I settled on a simple black dress that I'd bought for job interviews 2 years ago. It was modest, professional, and one of the few items I owned without visible wear. By 8:45, I was standing in front of my apartment building, clutching my purse like a lifeline. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of exhaust fumes and the Korean barbecue restaurant on the corner. My neighborhood looked especially shabby in the morning light. Graffiti covered the walls, trash accumulated in corners, and the building across the street had boarded up windows on the ground floor. This was my reality. A world away from the elegant luxury of Celestino and whatever world Matteo Russo inhabited. At exactly 9 o'clock, a black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. Not just any Mercedes, the kind with tinted windows so dark they reflected the morning sun like mirrors, the kind that cost more than most people's houses. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. Tall, built like a professional boxer, with a scar running along his jawline, and eyes that assessed me with the practiced efficiency of someone trained in security. He wore a black suit that somehow looked both elegant and threatening. "Miss Romano," he said, his voice a low rumble. Not a question. He knew exactly who I was. "Yes," I managed, my mouth suddenly dry. "I'm Luca. Mr. Russo sent me to collect you." He moved to open the back door, the gesture somehow making it clear this wasn't really a request I could decline. "Please." I glanced back at my apartment building, at the life I knew, safe and small and desperately hard. Then I looked at the open car door, at the darkness beyond it, at the unknown. My feet carried me forward before my brain could overthink it. The interior of the Mercedes smelled of leather and something else, something expensive I couldn't name. The seats were butter soft, and the silence once Luca closed the door was so complete, it felt like entering another world. Luca slid into the driver's seat and pulled smoothly into traffic without a word. I watched the familiar streets of my neighborhood slide past the tinted windows, each block taking me further from everything I knew. "Where are we going?" I finally asked, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet car. "Mr. Russo's estate," Luca replied, his eyes meeting mine briefly in the rearview mirror. "He's expecting you for breakfast. Estate, of course. Men like Matteo Russo didn't live in apartments or houses. They had estates. We drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city behind and entering an area I'd only glimpsed from highway overpasses. Old money lived here, in properties hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. Trees lined the streets, their leaves forming a canopy that dappled the morning sun. Finally, Luca turned down a private road marked only by a discrete number. The road wound through manicured grounds for nearly a mile before a house came into view, except calling it a house was like calling the ocean a puddle. The estate sprawled across the landscape, a modern masterpiece of glass and stone that somehow managed to look both imposing and elegant. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the morning light, and I could see a pool area to the left, steam rising from the heated water into the cool air. Jesus, I breathed before I could stop myself. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Luca's stoic face in the rearview mirror. Mr. Russo values comfort. He parked in a circular driveway in front of the main entrance, where wide stone steps led up to massive double doors. Before I could even reach for the handle, Luca had my door open, offering his hand to help me out. My legs felt unsteady as I stood, staring up at the house. This wasn't just wealth. This was power made tangible, a statement that the man who lived here operated on a completely different level than ordinary people. The front doors opened before we reached them. A woman in her 50s appeared, dressed in what I recognized as expensive casual clothes, her salt and pepper hair pulled back in an elegant bun. "Miss Romano," she said with a warm smile that somehow made me feel slightly less terrified. "Welcome. I'm Teresa, Mr. Russo's housekeeper. He's waiting for you in the breakfast room." I followed her through an entrance hall that could have fit my entire apartment 3 times over. Marble floors, artwork that looked original and probably priceless. A staircase that curved up to a second floor with railings that gleamed like they were polished daily. We passed through several rooms, each more impressive than the last, until Teresa led me through a set of French doors onto a covered terrace overlooking the grounds. A table was set for 2, white linens gleaming in the morning sun, crystal glasses catching the light, and sitting at the table, looking completely at ease in dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, was Matteo Russo. He stood when he saw me, and I was struck again by how his presence seemed to fill whatever space he occupied. Even here, in this enormous estate, he dominated the environment rather than being dwarfed by it. "Isabella," he said, and the way my name sounded in his accented voice sent that same shiver down my spine. "Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice?" The words slipped out before I could stop them, sharper than I intended. His lips curved into that slight smile. "There's always a choice. You're here because you chose to be. You sent me $2,000 and a cryptic message. That's not exactly in coercion," he interrupted, pulling out a chair for me. "No, it wasn't. It was a gesture of good faith. You can keep the money regardless of what happens in the next hour. Consider it compensation for ruining your evening in my suit." I hesitated, then sat, if only because my legs were shaking too much to keep standing. He returned to his own seat and Teresa appeared with coffee, pouring it into my cup with practiced grace before disappearing back into the house. "You're not what I expected," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. "What did you expect?" I thought of the rumors Elena had shared, the warnings in her eyes. Someone more obviously dangerous, I suppose. Danger doesn't always announce itself with sharp teeth and drawn weapons, Isabella. Sometimes it sits across from you at breakfast and offers you coffee. He took a sip of his own, studying me over the rim. "But I didn't bring you here to frighten you." "Then why am I here?" He set down his cup, his expression becoming more serious. "Because I meant what I said last night. You intrigue me. That's rare enough to warrant my attention. But more than that, I think I can help you. And you can help me. I'm a server in a restaurant you own. How could I possibly help you? By being exactly what you are, someone genuine, someone who hasn't been corrupted by my world yet." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about your mother." The change in topic threw me. "What? Your mother? She's at Mercy General's long-term care facility. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The treatments she's receiving are keeping her comfortable, but aren't curative. Her oncologist mentioned an experimental treatment trial at Johns Hopkins, but it's not covered by insurance and costs $30,000 just for the evaluation and first round. Ice flooded my veins. How do you know all of that? I had my people look into your situation, he said simply, as if that was completely normal and not deeply invasive. I needed to understand what drives you, what you need, what you're fighting for. That's a massive invasion of privacy, I said, anger cutting through my fear. You had no right. You're correct, he interrupted calmly. I had no legal right, but legality and reality don't always align in my world, Isabella. I needed information, so I acquired it. Now I know that you're drowning in medical debt, that you work 70-hour weeks trying to keep your head above water, that you've sacrificed your own education and future to care for your mother. His eyes held mine. That's admirable. It's also unsustainable, I wanted to argue, but he was right. I was drowning. Had been drowning for 2 years, ever since my mother's diagnosis. Every month I fell a little further behind. Every month the debt grew larger, the hope smaller. I can make it sustainable, Mateo continued. I can pay for the Johns Hopkins treatment, all of it. The trial, the medications, the follow-up care, whatever she needs. My heart stopped. Why would you do that? Because I need something from you in return. There it was. The catch. The thing I'd been dreading since last night. What? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What do you want? He stood, moving to the terrace railing, looking out over his estate. For a moment, he said nothing. And I had the strange sense that what he was about to say was difficult for him in some way. 3 years ago, he began, his back still to me, I lost someone very important to me, someone who kept me grounded, who reminded me there was more to life than power and control and the constant chess game of my business interests. He paused. Since then, I've been adrift. Efficient, yes. Successful, certainly, but missing something fundamental. He turned back to face me. Last night, when you spilled that wine, when you looked at me with terror and determination in equal measure, when you tried to apologize and make amends despite having no way to actually do so, I saw something I haven't seen in a very long time. Authenticity. Courage. The kind of strength that comes from fighting to survive rather than fighting to dominate. I still don't understand what you want from me, I said, my mind racing. I want you to work for me, he said simply. Not as a server, as a companion. Someone who accompanies me to social functions, business dinners, events where I need to present a certain image. Someone who can navigate both worlds, mine and the legitimate one, without the complications of my usual associates. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend, I said flatly. I want you to be exactly who you are, just at my side instead of serving tables. He moved back to the table, sitting across from me again. Full transparency, Isabella. My world is dangerous. There are people who would hurt me by hurting anyone I appear to care about. By being seen with me, you become a potential target. I can mitigate that risk with security, with careful planning, but I can't eliminate it entirely. You're asking me to put myself in danger. I'm asking you to make a choice. Continue drowning slowly while your mother suffers, or accept my help and the complications that come with it. His eyes held mine. The position pays $50,000 a month. Your mother's medical care is covered entirely, separately from your salary. You'd live here, in the guest house with full security. You'd have use of cars, drivers, anything you need. $50,000 a month. The number was so absurd I almost laughed. That was more than I made in a year. In 6 months I could save enough to finish my degree, to actually build a life instead of just surviving. What's the catch? I asked. There's always a catch. Something dark flickered across his face. The catch is that my world has rules, Isabella. Loyalty is paramount. Discretion is mandatory. Once you're in, getting out becomes complicated. You mean I'd be trapped? I mean you'd be protected. There's a difference. He stood, pulling an envelope from his pocket and placing it on the table between us. Inside is a contract. Legal, thorough, outlining exactly what I'm proposing. Take it home. Read it. Think about it. You have 48 hours to decide. I stared at the envelope like it might bite me. And if I say no, then you say no. The $2,000 is yours to keep. I'll arrange for your mother to receive the treatment anyway, anonymous donor, and you never hear from me again." He paused. "But I hope you say yes, Isabella. I think we could help each other." "Why?" I asked desperately. "Why me?" "You could have anyone. Someone sophisticated, educated, someone who actually belongs in your world." "Because those women know how to play the game," he interrupted. "They know what I am, what I do, and they see me as either a prize to win or a danger to manipulate. You see me as a man who ruined a perfectly good suit with expensive wine. That's refreshing." Despite everything, I felt a smile tug at my lips. He noticed, of course. There it is again. That real smile. He moved toward the French doors, then paused. "Luca will take you wherever you want to go. Home, the hospital to see your mother, anywhere. Think about my offer, Isabella. Really think about it." Then he was gone, leaving me alone on the terrace with a cup of coffee growing cold and an envelope that might contain either salvation or damnation. I sat there for several minutes, my mind a chaos of thoughts. 50,000 a month. My mother's treatment covered. A chance at an actual future instead of this grinding poverty that was slowly crushing me. All I had to do was step into the world of a man who casually invaded people's privacy, who commanded fear with a single look, whose business interests were probably more illegal than legal. Teresa appeared silently, refilling my coffee. "He's a good man, you know," she said quietly. "In his own way. He takes care of the people loyal to him. And the people who aren't loyal?" Her expression didn't change. "That's not a question you want answered, Miss Romano." Luca drove me to the hospital. I'd asked to see my mother before going home, needing to ground myself in why I was even considering this insanity. Mom was awake when I arrived, propped up in her bed, looking thin and tired but managing a smile when she saw me. "Bella, baby, I wasn't expecting you until this afternoon." "Got out of work early," I lied, settling into the chair beside her bed and taking her hand. Her skin felt papery, fragile, and I had to swallow past the lump in my throat. "You look troubled," she said, her eyes still sharp despite her illness, studying my face. "What's wrong?" Everything I wanted to say. Nothing I wanted to say. Instead, I asked, "Mom, if you could do anything, go anywhere, what would you choose?" She smiled, a ghost of the vibrant woman she'd been before cancer. "I'd go to Italy, see where your grandmother grew up, walk the same streets she walked before she came to America." Her eyes grew distant. "I always meant to do that, but life got in the way. Work, bills, responsibilities. We always think we have more time than we do." "What if you could do it?" I pressed. "What if money wasn't an issue? What if you could get treatment that actually worked, that gave you real time instead of just delaying the inevitable?" "Bella." "The experimental trial at Johns Hopkins," I interrupted. "Your doctor mentioned it." "What if you could do it?" Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Oh, baby, we've talked about this. That trial cost. What if it didn't matter what it cost? Would you do it?" She squeezed my hand weakly. "Of course I would. But sweetheart, miracles don't happen for people like us. We just keep fighting, keep pushing forward and hope for the best. But what if they could? What if I could give her this miracle? All it would cost was stepping into Matteo Russo's world." I stayed with my mother for 2 hours, talking about nothing important, just being present with her. When I finally left, Luca was waiting in the car, as patient and silent as ever. "Home," I told him, clutching the envelope Matteo had given me. My apartment felt smaller than ever after the morning at Matteo's estate. The walls seemed to close in, the sounds from neighboring units louder, the smell of mildew from the ancient plumbing more pungent. I sat on my second-hand couch and opened the envelope. The contract was exactly as he'd described. Detailed, legal, outlining duties and compensation and security arrangements. But it was the final clause that made my breath catch. This agreement may be terminated by either party with 30 days written notice. Upon termination, all medical care arrangements for family members will continue for the duration of treatment or 1 year, whichever is longer. Termination does not affect compensation already earned. He'd built in an escape. A way out if I couldn't handle his world. It wasn't a trap, at least not a complete one. My phone buzzed. Another text from that unknown number. "Whatever you decide, Isabella, know that I respect your courage for even considering it. Not many people would." I read the message 3 times, then looked around my apartment. At the water stain on the ceiling, at the windows that didn't quite close all the way, at the stack of medical bills on my kitchen counter that grew taller every week. Then I thought of my mother, wasting away in that hospital bed, still dreaming of Italy, still hoping for miracles that never came. I picked up my phone and typed a response before I could talk myself out of it. I need to ask some questions first. The reply was immediate. Of course. Dinner tomorrow night. I'll send a car at 7. Dress nicely. We're going somewhere special. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. This was really happening. I was actually considering this. No, I was past considering. The moment I'd asked for more questions instead of saying no, I'd made my choice. God help me, I was going to say yes. The black dress hanging on my closet door mocked me. I'd bought it that afternoon with money I couldn't afford to spend, using a credit card that was already dangerously close to its limit. But the text had said dress nicely and somewhere special, and I knew my interview dress wouldn't cut it. The saleswoman at the boutique had assured me it was perfect. Elegant without being overdressed, sophisticated without trying too hard. The deep emerald fabric hugged my curves in ways that made me feel simultaneously powerful and exposed. I checked my phone again. 6:45. 15 minutes until Luca arrived. My hands shook as I applied mascara, the wand trembling against my lashes. I'd spent the entire day in a state of nervous energy, unable to focus on anything for more than a few minutes. The contract sat on my kitchen counter, unsigned but already feeling like a done deal. Because it was a done deal. I'd known it the moment I'd asked for more questions instead of saying no. At exactly 7 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text. Outside whenever you're ready. No rush. I took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back looked like someone else. Someone who belonged in expensive restaurants and luxury cars. Someone who could stand beside a man like Matteo Russo without looking completely out of place. The illusion was good. Almost good enough to make me believe it. Luca's expression didn't change when I emerged from the building, but something flickered in his eyes that might have been approval. He opened the door without comment, and I slid into the familiar leather interior. "Where are we going?" I asked as he pulled into traffic. "Il Gabbiano," he replied. "Mr. Russo's private table, Il Gabbiano." Even I knew that name. It was the kind of restaurant that required reservations 6 months in advance, where a single meal cost more than my weekly grocery budget, where celebrities and politicians and people who shaped the world went to be seen. "Of course it is," I muttered, my anxiety ratcheting up another notch. The drive through the city felt surreal. We passed my neighborhood, the streets where I'd walked thousands of times, now viewing them through tinted windows from a car that cost more than most of the buildings. 2 worlds existing in the same space, never really touching. Il Gabbiano occupied the top floor of a historic building downtown, accessed by a private elevator that required a key card. Luca escorted me inside, the doors closing with a soft hiss that felt like sealing me off from the world I knew. The elevator opened directly into the restaurant. Soft lighting, live piano music drifting from somewhere unseen, the murmur of quiet conversations from tables spaced far enough apart to ensure privacy. Every detail screamed understated luxury. A woman in an elegant black suit approached immediately, her smile professional but warm. "Miss Romano, Mr. Russo is expecting you. Please, follow me." We wound through the dining room, past tables occupied by faces I recognized from news broadcasts and magazine covers. They barely glanced at me, too absorbed in their own important conversations to notice another person passing by. The hostess led me to a corner table with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking, lights stretching to the horizon, making the urban sprawl look almost beautiful from this height. And sitting at the table, looking like he'd been carved from the same elegant stone as the building itself, was Matteo. He stood as I approached, his eyes traveling over me in a way that made heat rise to my cheeks. He wore a dark suit, impeccably tailored, with a crisp white shirt open at the collar. No tie. Somehow that small detail made him look even more dangerous, like he'd made a concession to formality but refused to be completely tamed by it. "Isabella," he said, that accent wrapping around my name like silk. You look stunning. Thank you, I managed, letting him pull out my chair. His hand brushed my shoulder as I sat, the brief contact sending electricity down my spine. He returned to his own seat, and a server appeared immediately with champagne, pouring 2 glasses before disappearing as silently as he'd arrived. To new beginnings, Matteo said, raising his glass. I hesitated, then lifted my own. To questions and honest answers. Something like amusement flickered across his face. Fair enough. He took a sip, then set down his glass. Ask me anything, Isabella. I promised you transparency. Where did I even start? There were 1,000 questions crowding my mind, each one more dangerous than the last. What exactly do you do? I asked finally. Your real business, not the restaurants and real estate. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those intense dark blue eyes. Most people would start with easier questions. I'm not most people. No, he agreed softly. You're certainly not. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I operate in the spaces between legal and illegal, Isabella. Import-export, mostly. Some of what I move is legitimate. Some isn't. I broker deals, facilitate transactions, and ensure that certain goods reach certain people without excessive scrutiny from authorities who would object to the nature of those goods. Drugs. The word came out harsher than I intended. No. His voice turned cold. Never drugs. I have lines I don't cross, and that's one of them. What I deal in is information, access, occasionally weapons to parties who would have difficulty acquiring them through conventional channels. That's not better. I didn't say it was better. I said it was what I do. He leaned forward slightly. I'm not asking you to approve of my business, Isabella. I'm asking you to exist beside it without being consumed by it. And if I can't, if your world is too dark for me, then you leave. The contract allows for it. Your mother's treatment continues regardless. His eyes held mine. I won't trap you, Isabella, but I won't lie to you either about what being with me means. A server appeared with the first course. Some delicate arrangement of ingredients I couldn't identify. We ate in silence for a moment, the food rich and complex in ways that made Celestino's menu seem pedestrian by comparison. Why did you lose someone 3 years ago? I asked, setting down my fork. You mentioned it yesterday. Who was she? Pain flickered across his features, there and gone in an instant. Her name was Sophia. She was my fiancée. We'd known each other since childhood in Sicily, came to America together when we were teenagers. He paused. She died in a car accident. At least, that's what the official report said. But you don't believe it. I know it wasn't an accident. His voice dropped lower, taking on an edge I hadn't heard before. She was targeted by rivals trying to weaken me. They succeeded. I became reckless after her death, made mistakes, nearly lost everything I'd built. I'm sorry, I said softly, meaning it. Don't be. It was 3 years ago. I've learned to function with the loss. He took a sip of champagne. But I haven't found anyone since who made me want to try again. Until you spilled wine on me and looked at me like I was just a man who'd had his evening ruined, not the monster everyone else sees. I don't think you're a monster, I said before I could stop myself. You should. His eyes held a warning. Monsters often look like men, Isabella. That's what makes them dangerous. The second course arrived, then the third. We talked between bites, his questions probing but never invasive. He wanted to know about my childhood, my dreams before everything fell apart, what I'd studied in the 2 years of college I'd completed before my mother got sick. Nursing, I said, surprised he didn't already know. I wanted to help people, make a difference in some small way. That explains your tendency to try fixing broken things, he observed, even when those things might be better left alone. Are you calling yourself broken? I'm calling myself dangerous. There's a difference. He signaled for the check, though we hadn't ordered dessert. Walk with me? I nodded, letting him help me from my chair. His hand settled at the small of my back as we moved through the restaurant, possessive and protective in equal measure. I felt eyes following us, registering our exit, no doubt wondering who I was and what I meant to Matteo Russo. Instead of the elevator, he led me to a door I hadn't noticed before, marked private. It opened onto a rooftop terrace, empty except for comfortable seating areas and strategic lighting that created pools of warmth in the cool evening air. The city sprawled below us, a living organism of light and motion and millions of stories unfolding simultaneously. Up here it felt like we existed outside of it all, observers rather than participants. "This is why I bought the building," Matteo said, moving to the railing. "This view. This sense of perspective. It reminds me that no matter how powerful I become, I'm still just one person in a city of millions." I joined him at the railing, careful to maintain a few inches of distance between us. "Is that humility or strategy? Can't it be both?" He turned to look at me. "I need your answer, Isabella. Not because I'm impatient, but because if you say yes, there are things I need to put in motion. Security protocols, background checks for everyone you interact with, arrangements for your mother's transfer to Johns Hopkins. And if I say no, then I thank you for your time. Ensure your mother receives the treatment anyway, and we part ways." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a pen, holding it out to me. "But I think we both know what your answer is." I took the pen, its weight substantial in my hand. "I have conditions. I expected nothing less. I want to finish my degree. Online classes, night school, whatever works with this arrangement. But I'm not giving up on my education." "Agreed. I'll cover the costs. I want to keep seeing my mother regularly. Weekly visits at minimum, of course. You'll have use of drivers, or I'll arrange for her to visit here if she's well enough." I took a breath. "And I want honesty. No more invasions of privacy. No more investigating me without my knowledge. If you want to know something, you ask me directly." He was quiet for a moment, and I thought he might refuse. Then he nodded slowly. "That's fair. Anything else?" "Just one thing." I met his eyes. "Don't make me fall in love with you. I can handle your world, the danger, the complications. But if you make me care about you, and then I lose you the way Sophia—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Something vulnerable flashed across his face. "I can't promise that, Isabella. I can promise to protect you, to honor our agreement, to be honest with you. But feelings?" He shook his head. "Those aren't things we can control." "Then at least promise me you'll try not to die doing something reckless." A genuine smile broke across his face, transforming his features from coldly handsome to breathtakingly beautiful. "That I can promise." I pulled the contract from my purse, where I'd carried it all day like a talisman. My hand shook slightly as I uncapped the pen and signed my name on the designated line. Matteo took the contract, his fingers brushing mine, and added his own signature below. Then he folded it carefully and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "Welcome to my world, Isabella Romano," he said softly. "May you never regret this decision." "I probably will," I admitted, "but I'm choosing it anyway." He moved closer, eliminating the careful distance I'd maintained. One hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone with surprising gentleness for a man who'd just admitted to facilitating illegal weapons trades. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said, giving me time to object, to pull away, to maintain some boundary between us. I didn't move. His lips met mine softly at first, testing, questioning. I responded without thinking, my hands coming up to grip his jacket for balance as the kiss deepened. He tasted like champagne and danger and promises that might be broken but felt real in this moment. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing harder. His eyes had darkened to almost black, desire clear in them but controlled. Everything about Matteo was controlled. "We should go," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Your things will be packed and moved to the estate tomorrow. Luca will coordinate everything." "Tomorrow?" I blinked, still dizzy from the kiss. "That's fast." "I don't believe in delay once a decision is made." He offered his arm. "Besides, the sooner you're moved in, the sooner we can begin your education in my world." The ride back felt different. I sat closer to him in the car, acutely aware of every point where our bodies touched. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining, the gesture somehow more intimate than the kiss had been. "What happens now?" I asked as we approached my neighborhood. "Now you say goodbye to this life." He looked out at the familiar streets. "Tomorrow you become someone new, someone who belongs to my world, to me." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in my stomach. Luca pulled up in front of my building, but Matteo made no move to let me go. "Sleep well, Isabella," he said, pressing a kiss to my temple. Tomorrow, everything changes. I climbed the stairs to my apartment in a daze. Inside, everything looked the same. The water-stained ceiling, the worn furniture, the stack of medical bills. But it all felt different now. This was no longer my life. This was the life I was leaving behind. I called my mother, knowing she'd still be awake despite the late hour. "Bella, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, Mom. Better than fine, actually." I took a breath. "I got a new job, a really good one. It comes with medical coverage that will cover your treatment. The experimental trial at Johns Hopkins." Silence on the other end, then a soft sob. "Bella, what did you do?" "What I had to do," I said firmly. "What you've done for me my entire life. Whatever it takes. Baby, if this is something dangerous..." "It's not," I lied. Or maybe it wasn't entirely a lie. "It's just different. I'll be working for someone important, someone who can help us." We talked for another hour, my mother alternating between tears of gratitude and worry. Finally, she made me promise to be careful, to call her every day, to remember that no amount of money was worth my safety. I promised, even though we both knew I'd already made my choice. After we hung up, I packed a bag with essentials for tomorrow, though Matteo had said his people would handle everything. I couldn't quite bring myself to trust that completely yet. My phone buzzed with a text. "Thank you for trusting me, Isabella." "I won't fail you." Emma stared at the message for a long moment, then typed a response. "Don't make me regret this." His reply was immediate. "I'll do my best." "Sleep now. Tomorrow begins your new life." I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing sleep wouldn't come easily. In less than 12 hours, I'd leave this apartment, this life, this version of myself behind. I'd step into Matteo Russo's world, with all its luxury and danger and dark complexity. And despite everything, despite all the warnings screaming in my head, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe that made me foolish. Maybe it made me desperate. Or maybe it just made me human, reaching for a lifeline even though I suspected it might pull me under as much as it pulled me up. Only time would tell which it would be. Morning came too quickly. I woke to sunlight streaming through my thin curtains and the sounds of my neighbors arguing through paper-thin walls. For a moment I forgot. Then memory crashed back, and my stomach clenched with equal parts excitement and terror. Today, I was leaving this life behind. My phone showed 3 missed texts, all from Matteo. "Good morning. I hope you slept well. Luca will arrive at 10 a.m. to coordinate the move. Don't worry about anything. Just bring yourself." I showered quickly, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, and was finishing my coffee when a knock came at my door. Not Luca's measured knock, but something more aggressive, insistent. I opened it to find Marco standing in the hallway, his face flushed red, eyes wild with barely controlled rage. "You're sleeping with him," he spat before I could even speak. "Matteo Russo, you're sleeping with him." I stepped back instinctively. "Marco, what are you—" "Don't play stupid." He pushed into my apartment and I stumbled backward. I heard. "One of the VIP servers saw you two last night at Il Gabbiano. Saw him kiss you on the rooftop." His lip curled in disgust. "What did you do, Isabella? Spill that wine on purpose? Seduce him for money?" "Get out," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You have no right to be here. No right?" He laughed, the sound ugly. "I gave you that job. I trained you. And this is how you repay me? By whoring yourself to the boss?" The words hit like a physical slap. Before I could respond, Marco grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You think you're special now? You think he actually cares about you?" He yanked me closer, his breath hot on my face. "Men like Matteo Russo don't care about girls like you. You're entertainment, a distraction. And when he's done..." The door slammed open so hard it bounced off the wall. Luca filled the doorway, his expression colder than I'd ever seen it. Behind him stood 2 other men, equally large, equally dangerous looking. "Remove your hand from Miss Romano," Luca said, his voice deadly quiet. "Now." Marco's grip loosened immediately, but he didn't let go completely. "This is between me and..." "Remove. Your hand." Something in Luca's tone made Marco's face go pale. He released me, stepping back, but his eyes still burned with fury. "Mr. Russo would like a word with you," Luca continued, pulling out his phone. He pressed a button, and suddenly Matteo's voice filled the apartment, calm but carrying an undercurrent of barely leashed violence. "Marco," Matteo said, "I'm going to say this once. You put your hands on Isabella. You called her a whore. You entered her home uninvited and threatened her." A pause. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't have Luca break every finger you used to touch her." Marco's face went from red to white. "Mr. Russo, I didn't know. You thought wrong." Matteo's voice dropped lower. "Isabella belongs to me now, under my protection. That makes her untouchable. Do you understand what that means?" "Yes, sir." "It means if anyone so much as speaks to her disrespectfully, they answer to me. If anyone touches her without permission, they lose the hand that did it. If anyone threatens her, they disappear." The casual way he said it made it infinitely more terrifying. "Now you have two choices. You can apologize to Isabella, collect your final paycheck from Celestino, and leave this city by tomorrow. Or you can refuse, and we'll have a very different conversation." Marco turned to me, his earlier bravado completely gone. "I'm sorry, Miss Romano. I was out of line. I couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but nod." "Luca will escort you out," Matteo continued. "If I ever hear that you've attempted contact with Isabella again, in any form, our agreement is void. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." Luca gestured toward the door. Marco fled, followed by the two men who'd been standing silently throughout the exchange. Luca remained, his expression softening slightly as he looked at me. "Are you hurt?" he asked. I shook my head, though my arm throbbed where Marco had grabbed me. "I'm fine. Mr. Russo wants to speak with you." He held out the phone. I took it with trembling hands. "Matteo, are you all right?" His voice had transformed, the cold violence replaced by genuine concern. "Tell me the truth, Isabella. I'm okay. Shaken but okay. Luca should have been there earlier. This is my fault. I should have anticipated." He cut himself off. "We'll discuss this when you arrive. Are you still willing to come?" The question surprised me. After everything, he was still giving me an out. "Yes," I said, surprised by how certain I sounded. "I'm still coming." "Good." Relief colored his voice. "Luca will help with your things. I'll see you soon." The rest of the morning passed in a blur. True to Matteo's word, I didn't have to do anything. A team of people materialized, professionally packing my meager belongings into boxes, wrapping dishes I'd eaten off for years, carefully folding clothes that suddenly seemed shabby compared to the luxury I'd glimpsed at Matteo's estate. Mrs. Chen from across the hall watched with wide eyes as strangers carried furniture down the stairs. "You win lottery, Isabella?" she asked in her heavily accented English. "Something like that," I murmured, hugging her goodbye. By noon, my apartment was empty, just bare walls and the ghosts of a life I was leaving behind. I stood in the center of the living room, turning slowly, trying to memorize this moment, this version of myself. "Miss Romano," Luca said gently from the doorway. "We should go," I nodded, taking one last look before following him down the stairs for the final time. The drive to Matteo's estate felt longer than before, anticipation stretching every minute. Luca drove in silence, occasionally glancing at me in the rearview mirror but offering no commentary. When we finally pulled through the gates, my breath caught. In the daylight, the estate was even more impressive. Manicured gardens stretched in every direction, a fountain sparkled in the circular driveway, and the house itself gleamed like something from a dream. But it was the man standing on the steps who captured my attention. Matteo descended as the car stopped, dressed casually in dark slacks and a black sweater that emphasized his broad shoulders. His expression was unreadable until he opened my door and saw my face. Then concern flickered across his features. "Let me see your arm," he said without preamble. I hadn't realized I'd been rubbing the spot where Marco had grabbed me. I started to protest, but Matteo was already gently pushing up my sleeve, revealing the purple bruises forming in the shape of fingers. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I saw the dangerous man beneath the careful control. I should have broken his hands. It's just bruises, I said. I've had worse from carrying heavy trays. That's not the point. He carefully rolled my sleeve back down, his touch gentle despite the anger simmering in his eyes. No one touches you like that. Ever. You're very possessive for someone I just met 3 days ago. Yes, he agreed simply. I am. Get used to it. Teresa appeared with her warm smile, diffusing the tension. Welcome home, Miss Romano. Your suite is ready. Would you like to see it? Home. The word felt foreign on her tongue, applied to this place. Matteo's hand settled at the small of my back as we entered the house. I'll give you the full tour later. For now, let's get you settled. He led me through corridors I didn't remember from my first visit, up a sweeping staircase to the second floor. We stopped at double doors at the end of the hall. This is your space, he said, opening them. Completely private. I'm in the master suite on the other side of the house. You're free to come and go as you please. But this is yours. I stepped inside and stopped. Calling it a suite was an understatement. The sitting room was larger than my entire apartment had been, decorated in soft creams and blues that somehow felt both luxurious and comfortable. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens, and through an open doorway, I could see a bedroom with a bed that could easily sleep 4 people. There's a bathroom through there, Matteo pointed. Walk-in closet, small kitchen if you want privacy for meals, though Teresa prefers when people eat in the main dining room. She worries we'll all starve without her supervision. I moved to the windows, looking out at grounds that seemed to stretch forever. This is too much. This is what you deserve. He came to stand beside me. I meant what I said yesterday, Isabella. I take care of what's mine. I'm not a possession. No, you're not. He turned to face me fully. You're a woman who made a choice, who agreed to stand beside me despite knowing the risks. That makes you either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both. A smile tugged at his lips. Definitely both. He checked his watch. I have meetings this afternoon that I can't postpone, but tonight we'll have dinner here. Just us. And we'll discuss what happens next. What does happen next? That depends. His eyes held mine. How fast do you want to jump into the deep end? Before I could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression hardened. I need to take this. Rest. Explore. Teresa will show you around if you'd like. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, the gesture unexpectedly tender. Welcome home, Isabella. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in my beautiful new prison. I spent the afternoon exploring. The house was enormous, room after room of carefully curated luxury. A library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A gym that would shame most professional facilities. A media room with a screen the size of a small car. An indoor pool with a retractable roof that currently let in the afternoon sun. But it was the art that caught my attention. Everywhere I looked, there were paintings, sculptures, photographs. Some I recognized as famous pieces that should have been in museums. Others were unknown to me, but clearly valuable. Mr. Russo is a collector, Teresa said, finding me staring at a painting that looked like it might be a Monet. He says beautiful things should be enjoyed, not locked away. Is that why I'm here? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Another beautiful thing to collect? Teresa's expression softened. No, Miss Romano. You're here because you make him remember he's human. That's far more valuable than any painting. Evening came too quickly. I changed for dinner, choosing a simple dress from the few I'd brought, very aware that everything I owned suddenly seemed inadequate. Matteo found me on the terrace outside, my suite, watching the sun set over the city in the distance. Beautiful, isn't it? He said, coming to stand beside me. He'd changed as well, though he still looked effortlessly elegant in dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. "It's perfect," I admitted. "Almost too perfect. Like it's not quite real." "It's real. Just a different version of reality than you're used to." He offered his arm. "Come, dinner is ready." He led me to a smaller dining room I hadn't seen during my earlier exploration. Intimate, with a table set for two, candles flickering. Despite the fading daylight and windows overlooking the gardens, "I thought we should start gently," he said, pulling out my chair. "Before I throw you into the chaos of my world, dinner was incredible. Course after course of food I couldn't identify but tasted divine. We talked easily, the conversation flowing, between serious topics and surprising moments of humor. "Tell me something no one else knows about you," I said over dessert. He considered the question, swirling wine in his glass. "I wanted to be a pianist when I was young, studied for years. But my father said music was a hobby, not a life. That men like us had responsibilities that didn't include art. Do you still play?" "Sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep." He met my eyes. "Maybe I'll play for you someday." "I'd like that." We moved to the terrace as night fell completely, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Matteo stood close, not touching but near enough that I could feel his warmth. "Tomorrow things get more complicated," he said quietly. "I have a business dinner. High-profile clients. You'll accompany me." "Is this the jumping into the deep end you mentioned?" "Yes." He turned to face me. "These are dangerous men, Isabella. Powerful. They'll see you as either an asset or a liability to me. You need to be careful what you say, what you reveal. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to prepare you." His hand came up to cup my face. "But if at any point it becomes too much, you say the word, and we leave. Your safety matters more than any business deal." I leaned into his touch, marveling at how natural it felt. "I can handle it." "I know you can." He leaned down, his lips brushing mine softly. "That's why I chose you." The kiss deepened, his arms pulling me closer, and for a moment the world narrowed to just this. His mouth on mine, his heart beating against my chest, the promise and danger wrapped together in his embrace. When we finally separated, both breathing hard, his eyes had darkened to almost black. "I should let you rest," he said, his voice rough. "Tomorrow will be challenging." "Matteo," I called as he started to leave. "Thank you. For today. For protecting me from Marco. For all of this." He paused, looking back. "Don't thank me yet, Isabella. You don't know what you've really signed up for." But as I watched him disappear into the house, I realized I didn't care. Whatever came next, whatever dangers lurked in his world, I was already in too deep to turn back. And the terrifying part was, I didn't want to. The dress hanging in my closet wasn't there when I'd gone to bed. I stood in front of it, still in my robe, coffee cooling in my hand as I stared at the midnight blue silk that probably cost more than 6 months of my old rent. A note was pinned to the hanger in Matteo's distinctive handwriting. "For tonight. The color matches your eyes when you're angry." I touched the fabric, feeling its weight, its quality. This wasn't just a dress, it was armor, a costume for the role I was about to play. My phone buzzed. "Matteo, of course. Good morning. Teresa will help you prepare. The car leaves at 7. "Prepare for what exactly?" I typed back. "For being the most captivating woman in the room. You already know how to do that." Despite my nerves, I smiled. He had a way of saying things that were both possessive and oddly reassuring. The day passed in a strange limbo. I tried to distract myself with a book from the library, but couldn't focus. Teresa appeared at 4 with a woman she introduced as Sophia, a stylist who looked at me with the clinical assessment of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. "Mr. Russo wants elegant but not ostentatious," Sophia said, circling me. "Sophisticated but approachable. You're meeting the Constantine brothers tonight. Russians, very traditional. They'll judge him by you. No pressure then, I muttered. Sophia's lips twitched. You'll be fine. You have something they don't often see in Mr. Russo's world. What's that? Authenticity. She began pulling out makeup, brushes, products I didn't recognize. Now sit, we have work to do. 2 hours later, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The dress fit like it had been made for me, hugging curves I didn't know I had before flowing to just above my knees. My hair had been styled in soft waves, my makeup subtle but striking. Diamond earrings that Sophia said were on loan from Matteo's collection glittered at my ears. Remember, Sophia said as she packed up her supplies, you're not there to impress them. You're there to stand beside Mr. Russo and remind everyone that he's untouchable. That's all? Easy. Just embody power and grace while dining with Russian mobsters. No problem. At 6:45, I descended the stairs on trembling legs, one hand on the railing for balance and heels higher than I usually wore. Luca waited in the foyer, his expression unchanging as he saw me, but he nodded once in approval. Mr. Russo is in the car, he said. Shall we? The Mercedes was running, its engine a quiet purr. Luca opened the back door, and I slid inside to find Matteo waiting. He looked devastating in a charcoal suit, his hair perfectly styled, every inch the powerful businessman. But when he saw me, something flickered in his dark blue eyes that made heat rise to my cheeks. Isabella, he breathed, his voice rough. You look like I belong in your world? I finished, some of my nervousness bleeding into sarcasm. Like you own it. He reached for my hand, bringing it to his lips. Thank you for doing this. I haven't done anything yet. You put on the dress. You're here. That's enough. His thumb traced circles on my palm. Tonight will be tense. Victor Constantine wants to expand his operations into territories I control. He's testing me, trying to find weaknesses. And I'm supposed to prove you don't have any? You're supposed to be yourself. He met my eyes. Just stay close to me. Don't let them separate us. And if anything feels wrong, if anyone makes you uncomfortable, you squeeze my hand twice. I'll handle it. The restaurant was in a part of the city I'd never been to, accessed through a private entrance with security that made airport checkpoints look casual. Men with earpieces and barely concealed weapons checked Luca thoroughly before we were allowed through. They're thorough, I whispered as we walked down a hallway lined with expensive art. They're terrified, Matteo corrected. Victor has many enemies. He trusts no one. The private dining room was smaller than I expected, intimate even, with a single round table set for 6. 3 men already sat there, all in dark suits that screamed money and danger. They stood as we entered. The man in the center was clearly Victor Constantine. Late 50s, silver hair, ice blue eyes that assessed me with the warmth of a shark examining prey. His smile didn't reach those eyes. Matteo, he said, his accent thick but his English perfect. Thank you for joining us. Victor. Matteo's hand tightened on mine. May I introduce Isabella Romano? Victor's gaze traveled over me slowly, deliberately. I forced myself not to squirm under the scrutiny. Miss Romano, a pleasure. I was not aware Matteo had found someone special. The pause before special was loaded with implications I didn't want to examine. The pleasure is mine, Mr. Constantine, I said, proud that my voice remained steady. Please call me Victor. Any friend of Matteo's is a friend of mine. He gestured to the other men, my brother Alexei, and our associate Dmitri. We sat, Matteo positioning us so I was on his right, slightly protected by his body from the others. Wine was poured, a red so dark it looked almost black. To new partnerships, Victor said, raising his glass. To profitable ventures, Matteo responded, the words sounding like a challenge. The first course arrived, some delicate arrangement I couldn't identify. Conversation flowed around me, business talk wrapped in pleasantries. I stayed quiet, observing, the way Matteo had instructed. But I felt Victor's eyes on me constantly, assessing, calculating. So, Miss Romano, he said during a lull in the conversation, how did you meet our Matteo? I spilled wine on him, I said before I could think better of honesty. Silence fell over the table. Then Victor laughed, a booming sound that seemed genuine. "Did you? And he didn't have you killed? You must be very charming. Or very lucky," I replied. "Luck runs out, Devochka." The endearment sounded wrong coming from him. "Charm lasts longer." "Isabella has both," Matteo interjected smoothly. "Which is why she's here." The second course came. The conversation shifted to territories, percentages, arrangements I only half understood. But I understood the tension, the way each man's words carried multiple meanings, the chess game being played with words instead of pieces. Then Dmitri, who'd been silent until now, leaned forward. "Tell me, Miss Romano, what do you do?" "Before Matteo, I mean." "I was a server," I said simply. "A server." Victor's eyebrows rose. "How democratic of you, Matteo. Most men in your position choose from different pools." "Isabella is not most women," Matteo said, his voice carrying a warning. "Clearly." Victor took a sip of wine. "But you must understand my curiosity. You appear one day with a woman no one has vetted, no one knows. In our business, that raises questions." "Questions you have no right to ask," Matteo replied, his tone hardening. "Don't I?" Victor set down his glass with deliberate precision. "We are discussing a partnership worth millions, Matteo. I need to know you are thinking clearly. That you haven't been compromised by a pretty face." I felt Matteo's body tense beside me. Under the table, I placed my hand on his thigh, a silent plea for calm. "I assure you," Matteo said through gritted teeth, "my business judgment is unimpaired." "Then you won't mind if I verify that?" Victor nodded to Dmitri, who pulled out a folder. "We had Miss Romano investigated, quite thoroughly." My blood turned to ice. "You had no right," Matteo started, but Victor interrupted. "I had every right, and what I found is interesting." He opened the folder. "Isabella Romano, 24, former nursing student, mother dying of cancer, mountain of medical debt. Working as a server until 3 days ago when she suddenly moved into your estate." His cold eyes found mine. "Tell me, Miss Romano, how much is Matteo paying you to play this role?" "Victor," Matteo's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You're crossing a line." "Am I? Or am I simply being thorough?" He smiled, but it was a predator's expression. "In my experience, women who appear from nowhere and capture powerful men's attention are either very clever or very well planted." "Which are you, I wonder?" "Neither," I said, finding my voice though my heart hammered. "I'm just someone who caught Matteo's interest. That's all. Just someone." Victor leaned back. How modest. But modest girls don't usually end up in places like this, do they? They don't usually wear $50,000 dresses and borrowed diamonds. The number made my head spin. 50,000? For a dress? "The meeting is over," Matteo said, standing and pulling me up with him. "When you're ready to discuss business without insulting my guest, you know how to reach me." "Sit down, Matteo." Victor's voice turned cold. "We're not finished." "Yes, we are." Alexei stood then, moving to block the door. He was huge, easily 6.5 feet of muscle, his hand moving inside his jacket. The temperature in the room dropped. "You want to threaten me?" Matteo asked quietly. "In a private room with no witnesses except your own men?" He laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "I expected more from you, Victor." "No threats. Just conversation." Victor gestured to Alexei, who reluctantly moved aside. "But think carefully, Matteo, about who you trust, about who you bring into your inner circle. Weakness gets exploited in our world. You know this." "Isabella isn't a weakness," Matteo said. "She's a choice I made, and I stand by my choices." He led me from the room, his hand firm on my lower back. Luca materialized from somewhere, flanking us as we walked down the hallway. I felt eyes on us, felt the weight of watching, waiting. We didn't speak until we were in the car, door closed, Luca pulling away from the restaurant. Then Matteo exploded. "That arrogant bastard," he snarled, his control finally snapping. "Investigating you. Threatening you in front of me?" "Matteo, no." He turned to me, and I saw fury burning in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Isabella. I never should have brought you there, never should have exposed you to that. You warned me it would be dangerous. Dangerous is one thing. That was a calculated insult." His hands clenched into fists. He was testing me, seeing if he could provoke me through you. And it nearly worked. I reached for his hand, uncurling his fingers and lacing them with mine. But it didn't. You stayed in control. You got us out. This time. His voice dropped. But Victor Constantine is not a man who forgets perceived slights. By walking out, I've made an enemy. You already had an enemy. He just confirmed it tonight. He looked at me, something like wonder flickering across his face. You're not scared. I'm terrified, I admitted. But I'm also angry. He had no right to investigate me, to throw my life in my face like it was something shameful. It's not shameful. It's beautiful. He pulled me closer. You survived. You fought. You sacrificed for your mother. That's not weakness, Isabella. That's strength. Victor doesn't see it that way. Victor sees everything as a weapon to be used or a weakness to exploit. He doesn't understand loyalty, genuine connection. His thumb brushed my cheek. That's why he'll lose in the end. We drove in silence for a while, the city lights sliding past the tinted windows. Finally, I asked the question burning in my mind. What happens now? With Victor? Now? Matteo's expression hardened. Now we prepare for war. The word hung between us, heavy with implications. War, I repeated. Actual war? The kind we fight in the shadows. Economic pressure. Strategic alliances. Information warfare. He met my eyes. And yes, sometimes actual violence, though I'll do everything in my power to keep you away from that. Matteo, maybe I should. Don't. He gripped my hand tighter. Don't say you should leave. Don't say this is too much. Because if you leave now, Victor wins. He proves you were exactly what he accused you of being, a weakness to exploit. I'm not leaving, I said, surprising myself with how certain I sounded. I'm just processing. His expression softened. That's fair. Tonight was a lot. When we reached the estate, Matteo didn't let me go to my room. Instead, he led me to his study, a room I hadn't seen before. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk that commanded the space. But it was the piano in the corner that caught my attention. You said you'd play for me someday, I said softly. He looked at the piano, then at me. I'm not sure this is the right moment. Please. I need something beautiful after tonight. He hesitated, then nodded, moving to the piano and sitting at the bench. I curled into a nearby chair, watching as his fingers found the keys. The music that filled the room was heartbreaking. Chopin, I thought, though I wasn't sure. Melancholy and beautiful, and so at odds with the dangerous man I'd seen tonight that it made my chest ache. When the last note faded, silence hung heavy in the air. My mother used to play that, he said quietly. Before she died. Before my father pulled me fully into this world. How old were you? 16. Old enough to understand what my father really did. Young enough to still dream of something else. He closed the piano lid carefully. Sophia reminded me there were other ways to live. Other choices to make. And then she died. And then she died. And I forgot again. He stood, coming to kneel beside my chair, until you looked at me like I was just a man who'd had wine spilled on him. I touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. You are just a man, Matteo. A complicated, dangerous man. But still just a man. A man who's putting you in danger. A man who's giving my mother a chance to live. Who's giving me a future I never imagined. I leaned down, pressing my forehead to his. I choose this, Matteo. Even knowing the cost. He kissed me then, deep and desperate, his hands tangling in my hair. The kiss tasted like promises and danger, and something that might have been love if we'd had time to find out. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard. He rested his head against my shoulder. "Stay with me tonight," he whispered. "Just sleep. I need to know you're safe." I should have said no, should have maintained some boundary. But the vulnerability in his voice, the fear I'd heard in it, broke something in me. "Okay," I whispered back. "Okay." I woke to sunlight streaming through, unfamiliar windows and the warmth of another body beside me. For a disoriented moment, panic flared. Then memory returned. Matteo's study, the piano, his whispered request. "Stay with me tonight." We'd fallen asleep in his bed, fully clothed, his arm wrapped protectively around my waist. Now, in the soft morning light, I studied his face. Asleep, the hard edges softened. He looked younger, more vulnerable, like the boy who'd once dreamed of being a pianist. His eyes opened, immediately finding mine, and a slow smile curved his lips. "Good morning." "Good morning," I whispered back, suddenly shy despite everything. "I should apologize for monopolizing you last night," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "But I'm not sorry." "I'm not either." His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheek. "Isabella, about last night with Victor." His phone shattered the moment, buzzing insistently on the nightstand. Matteo's expression darkened as he reached for it, reading the screen. "What is it?" I asked, sitting up. "Luca, there's been an incident." He was already moving, the vulnerable man from moments ago replaced by the dangerous one I'd seen at the restaurant. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me." "Matteo, what's happening?" "Victor is making his move." He pulled on shoes, checking his phone again. "Sooner than I expected. Stay in this room, Isabella. Don't open the door for anyone except me or Teresa." Fear spiked through me. "Is it that bad?" He paused at the door, looking back. "It could be. But I won't let anything happen to you. I promise." Then he was gone, and I was alone in his massive bedroom with my heart hammering and no idea what was happening. I couldn't just sit there. I moved to the windows, looking out over the grounds. Everything appeared normal, the gardens peaceful, the fountain sparkling in the morning sun. But then I saw them. Men in dark suits moving with purpose around the perimeter, more than I'd seen before. Security had been doubled, maybe tripled. My phone rang. An unknown number. I shouldn't have answered, but something made me. "Hello?" "Miss Romano." Victor Constantine's accented voice made my blood run cold. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "How? Did you get this number?" "I have many resources, Devochka. That is not important. What is important is that you listen very carefully to what I'm about to say." Every instinct screamed to hang up. Instead, I stayed silent, waiting. Matteo is a proud man, too proud. Last night, he chose you over a very lucrative business arrangement. That was unwise. Victor's tone remained conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. "I'm offering you a chance to correct his mistake. I'm not interested in anything you're offering. Not even your mother's life." The world tilted. "What?" "Catherine Romano, currently at Mercy General's long-term care facility, room 347. She's very ill, isn't she? Would be such a shame if something happened to complicate her treatment." Rage flooded through me, burning away the fear. "You touch my mother and I'll—" "You'll what?" He laughed. "No, Devochka, you'll listen. You'll convince Matteo to reconsider our arrangement, to be reasonable. And in exchange, your mother receives the finest care money can buy. She might even survive. Matteo will kill you for this. Matteo will do nothing if he wants to keep you alive." The playfulness left Victor's voice. "You have until noon to convince him. After that, decisions will be made for you both." The line went dead. I stood frozen. phone clutched in my trembling hand, mind racing. Victor had threatened my mother, had somehow gotten my private number, had penetrated whatever security Matteo thought he had. I should tell Matteo. That was the obvious choice. But Victor's words echoed. Matteo will do nothing if he wants to keep you alive. If I told Matteo about the threat, he'd react. Violently, probably. And Victor was clearly prepared for that. This was a trap, and I was the bait, unless I changed the game entirely. I grabbed my phone and called the one person who might help without telling Matteo. Miss Romano? Luca answered on the first ring. Are you all right? I need you to take me somewhere, now, without telling Matteo. Silence. Then, I can't do that. Mr. Russo gave explicit orders. Victor Constantine just called me. He threatened my mother. He wants me to convince Matteo to accept his deal, and he gave me until noon. I spoke rapidly, urgently. If I tell Matteo, he'll go after Victor directly. People will die. Maybe him. Maybe me. I need to handle this differently. What are you planning? Something stupid, probably, but it's my choice to make. I took a breath. Please, Luca, help me. Another pause. Where do you need to go? 20 minutes later, I was in the Mercedes, Luca driving in tense silence. I'd changed quickly, choosing jeans and a sweater. My own clothes, not the expensive things Matteo had provided. I needed to feel like myself for what came next. Mr. Russo is going to kill me for this, Luca muttered as we drove. Only if we survive for him to find out, I replied, trying for levity and failing. We pulled up to Mercy General's long-term care facility. My mother's room was on the 3rd floor, and I took the stairs 2 at a time, Luca following behind like a silent shadow. Mom was awake, reading a magazine. She looked better than the last time I'd seen her, some color in her cheeks. The new medications Matteo had arranged were already working. Bella? Her face lit up, then concern creased her features as she saw my expression. What's wrong? Mom, I need you to listen carefully. Don't ask questions, just trust me. I grabbed her hand. We're transferring you to a different facility. Today. Right now. What? Why? Because someone dangerous knows you're here, and I need you somewhere safe before... I stopped, not wanting to scare her more than necessary. Before what, Isabella? Her voice sharpened with maternal authority. What have you gotten yourself into? Something complicated. But I'm handling it. I looked at Luca. Can you arrange the transfer? Somewhere private, secure, where Victor's people can't find her? Luca was already on his phone. I know a place. Private facility, discreet, heavily secured. Mr. Russo uses it for sensitive situations. Do it. Within an hour, my mother was being transferred by private ambulance, Luca's people surrounding her with military precision. I kissed her goodbye at the loading bay, promising to explain everything later. Bella, she said, gripping my hand. Whatever you're doing, be careful. You're all I have. You're all I have too, Mom. That's why I'm doing this. As the ambulance pulled away, I checked my phone. 11:15. 45 minutes until Victor's deadline. Take me to Victor, I told Luca. His expression didn't change, but I saw the tension in his jaw. Miss Romano, that's exactly what he wants. It's a trap, I know, but it's a trap I'm walking into voluntarily, which changes the equation. I met his eyes. And you're going to let me. Because deep down, you know this is the only way to end this without a bloodbath. Mr. Russo will never forgive me. Yes, he will. Eventually. I hoped I was right. Now drive. Victor's base of operations was a warehouse in the industrial district, exactly the cliché location I'd expected. Luca parked a block away, his hand moving to the weapon I now realized he always carried. I'm coming with you, he said. No. You're staying here as backup. If I'm not out in 30 minutes, then you call Matteo and tell him everything. I opened the door before he could argue. And Luca? Thank you for trusting me. The warehouse was guarded but not heavily. 2 men at the entrance, both eyeing me with surprise as I approached. I'm here to see Victor Constantine, I said, proud that my voice didn't shake. He's expecting me. They exchanged glances, then one spoke into a radio. A moment later he nodded. Inside. 2nd floor. The interior was exactly what I'd imagined. Concrete floors, metal stairs, the smell of oil and cold. Victor waited in what appeared to be a makeshift office, Alexei and Dmitri flanking him like gargoyles. Miss Romano. Victor smiled, standing. I must admit, I didn't expect you to come alone. Foolish or brave? Practical, I replied, staying near the door. You wanted to talk. So talk. Direct, I like that. He gestured to a chair. Please sit. I'll stand, as you wish. He moved to a small bar, pouring vodka into 2 glasses. You understand the situation, yes? I need Matteo to accept my terms. You're the leverage that makes him cooperate. I understand you're making a mistake, I said. Matteo doesn't respond well to threats, especially threats against people he cares about. Which is why I'm not threatening you. I'm offering you a choice. He slid one of the glasses toward me. Convince Matteo to accept my terms and you both live. Everyone profits, simple. And if I refuse, then I take what I want anyway. But people die in the process. Possibly you. Probably Matteo. He sipped his vodka. I prefer the peaceful solution, but I'm prepared for either. I looked at the vodka, at Victor's cold smile, at the 2 large men blocking the other exit. Every tactical disadvantage screamed at me, but I'd learned something from Matteo these past few days. Power wasn't always about physical strength. Sometimes it was about controlling the narrative. You're right, I said, picking up the glass. Matteo is proud. He won't back down from a threat. I took a sip, the vodka burning down my throat. But he might back down for me, if I ask him to. Victor's eyes narrowed. You're offering to help me? I'm offering to survive. You get your deal. Matteo keeps his pride by framing it as his choice, made for me, and I get to keep the people I love alive. I set down the glass. That's what you wanted, isn't it? For me to be the weakness you can exploit? You're smarter than I gave you credit for, Devochka. I'm a survivor, Victor. Same as you, same as Matteo. We all do what we must to protect what's ours. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. Convince Matteo. You have 24 hours. I'll need something in return. Proof that my mother is safe, that you've called off whatever surveillance you had on her. Done. He gestured to Dmitri, who made a call. Your mother is no longer a concern, because I'd already moved her. But he didn't need to know that. One more thing, I said, moving toward the door. This ends today. Whatever deal you make with Matteo, after that, you leave us alone. No more games. No more tests. Bold demands from a server-turned-mistress. I'm not his mistress, I said coldly. I'm his partner. Learn the difference. I walked out before he could respond, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Luca was waiting at the car, his expression torn between relief and fury. Are you insane? He hissed as I got in. Do you have any idea what Mr. Russo is going to do when he finds out? Probably yell. Maybe worse. I buckled my seatbelt. Take me home, Luca. It's time to face the music. Matteo was waiting in the entrance hall when we arrived. One look at his face told me Luca had called ahead, warned him. His expression was a careful blank, but I could see the fury simmering beneath. My office, he said quietly. Now. I followed him through the house, acutely aware of Luca trailing behind, probably as backup. In the study, Matteo moved to stand behind his desk, putting physical distance between us. Explain, he said, his voice deadly calm. Explain why you left this house against my explicit orders. Why you went to see Victor Constantine. Why you risked everything I've been trying to protect. Because it was my choice to make, I replied, refusing to be cowed. Victor threatened my mother. He wanted me to convince you to accept his deal. So I went to him directly and told him I would. You told him... Matteo's control slipped. Isabella, do you understand what you've done? You've made yourself a target. You've confirmed that you're exactly the weakness he thought you were. No. I confirmed that I'm a person who makes my own choices. There's a difference. I moved closer to the desk. He wanted leverage over you. I took that away by offering to cooperate. On my terms, your terms. He laughed, the sound harsh. You don't get to make terms with men like Victor. You don't get to negotiate from a position of weakness. I wasn't weak. I was strategic. I pulled out my phone, showing him the call log. He called me at 7:30 this morning. Threatened my mother. Gave me until noon to convince you. I met his eyes. I had Luca move my mother to a secure location before I ever went to see Victor. He thinks he still has leverage. He doesn't. Matteo stared at me, emotions warring across his face. You moved your mother to a private facility, heavily secured. Victor's people don't know where she is. And then you went to him, alone, unarmed, with no backup except Luca. Yes. Why? The anger in his voice cracked, revealing something else beneath. Why would you risk yourself like that? Because you would have gone in ready for war, I said softly. People would have died. Maybe you. And I couldn't. My voice broke. I couldn't lose you, Matteo. Not when I just found you. The distance between us disappeared. He pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. Don't ever do that again, he whispered into my hair. Don't ever put yourself in danger like that. I can't. He pulled back, cupping my face in his hands. I can't lose you either, Isabella. Do you understand? You've become everything to me in less than a week. If something had happened to you, nothing happened. I'm here. I'm safe. This time. His forehead pressed against mine. But Victor won't stop, Isabella. Today might have bought us time, but he'll come again. He'll test us again. That's who he is. Then we'll face it. Together. I gripped his wrists. I'm not going anywhere, Matteo. You're stuck with me. Good, he breathed. Because I'm not letting you go. He kissed me then, deep and desperate and claiming. Different from before. This wasn't just desire or attraction. This was need. Connection. The acknowledgement that we'd both risked everything and chosen each other anyway. When we finally broke apart, Luca was diplomatically studying the bookshelves, pretending he hadn't witnessed everything. Sir, he said quietly, Victor's people have been calling. They want to meet tonight to finalize terms. Matteo's expression hardened. Then we meet. But this time I set the terms. He looked at me. And Isabella stays here, behind security, I trust. I should go with you. No. His voice left no room for argument. You've done enough. More than enough. Now let me protect you. I wanted to argue, but I saw the fear still lingering in his eyes, the terror that he'd almost lost me, so I nodded. Okay, but you come back to me, Matteo Russo. You come back safe. Always, he promised. The hours while he was gone were torture. Teresa brought food I couldn't eat. I paced my suite, then his study, unable to settle. Finally, I sat at the piano, my fingers finding the keys, playing the melody I'd heard him play nights ago. That's where he found me when he returned, just after midnight. I heard his footsteps and spun around. Well, it's done. He looked exhausted, his suit rumpled, a cut above his eye that hadn't been there before. Victor gets his territories, but with conditions. Heavy restrictions, financial penalties if he oversteps, and he stays away from you. That was non-negotiable. You're hurt. I went to him, touching the cut gently. Minor disagreement about terms. Nothing serious. He caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm. It's over, Isabella. Really over. We're safe. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. So what happens now? Now? A smile tugged at his lips. Now we live. We build something real. You finish your degree. Your mother gets her treatment. We figure out what this is between us without the threat of imminent death hanging over our heads. That sounds suspiciously like a normal life.